Hi, welcome to the next assembly video for the RepRap Prusa Mendel Iteration 2. Okay, in this video we're going to solder the components to the heat bed and we're going to get it mounted to the y-axis. If you need to, go ahead and turn your Z screws to bring the x-axis up and out of the way of the bed so you have a place to work. And so first off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a couple of holes down here at the end so that I have a place to run the wires through. And the best spots are going to be little off center to the belt, like away from the belt here. And you could go ahead and use 8mm or 5/16 drill bit it, but if you want, you can do something smaller as long as the wires can fit through okay. And I'll show you once it's done here what it's for and what it looks like and everything. Okay. I'll go ahead and mark. I want it on this side. Probably do one here about. This is a really lousy drill bit that I'm using here. Be sure to use a nice sharp drill bit. That one is terrible. I'm actually think I'm going to throw that away. Be careful when you buy drill bits. I mean, I'm sure you probably already have experience in that, but I have found that there is a big difference in quality between manufacturers. I went and bought a set of metric drill bits on eBay, and they were just absolutely terrible. If you're going to buy a set, you have to spend at least $50. Okay, that's pretty good. It's not as good as I expected it would turn out, but that's going to work just fine. And so what this will do is, when you run the wire down from the connectors on the heated bed, you'll be able to run these through, and then it won't pull on the wire when it moves back and forth. So that's what that's for. Okay, so let's go ahead and get these components soldered on. Move this out of the way. Follow safety precautions when you use a soldering iron. I'm going to use rosin core solder. This is 0.032 diameter, 60/40, which will work just fine. And then we're going to need the components. This has 2 blue LEDs and 1 resistor. So while the soldering iron heats up, I'm just going to go ahead and get these wires ready. Might as well do the other side too. Now, normally you should use a sponge for the soldering iron. I'm using a wet cotton paper towel. Because I don't have a sponge. Okay, this is the resistor. The resistor goes right here on the right side, and then on the left side there's two spots for the LEDs. This is designed so that you can put these LEDs in either order, in opposite of order of each other, so that if you mix up the polarity, they'll still work okay. So that one's pointing left, and that one's pointing right. So I like to just rest them on top of where they're supposed to be soldered. So just make sure that the LEDs, one has a positive on the left and the other has the negative on the left. And the resistor doesn't matter. I'll show you here. Okay, now that those are in place, then you could just go ahead and put a little solder on your iron. Hold down the component and solder it into place. Components are really tiny. I'm really not good at these surface mounts. Go ahead and prime the parts for the wires, and then prime the wires. sure you know how to solder if you're building a RepRap, but you know, you could probably solder even better than me, so I'm not too worried about you here in this part. But the wires went together a lot better than the components here. I'm not sure. I used my pencil to kind of hold them down while I soldered them in. I did not do a good job here, but it is good enough to hold. So, okay, so that takes care of soldering for now. We're probably going to need to do this in a later video. Let's do some more soldering in a later video. But anyway, set that aside. So that should be good enough. Now let's go ahead and get this mounted to the RepRap. Well, those holes look terrible. That's too bad. So this is going to get mounted upright like this. This is an MK1 heat bed, so the actual the heated part of the bed is on this side, where you can see all of the lines. So it'll heat better if you put that on the top. So that's how we're going to mount this. Is right here. Let's see. The 25mm screws, bolts should be just fine here. So we'll need 4 of those. And there are 4 springs for this too. The springs are really optional. And we'll do the thermistor later. But okay. So go ahead and put. Now, you know, you can use washers on this if you want to. I'm not going to. I'm just going to use the M3 25mm bolts with the M3 nuts, and no washers in this. You can use washers if you want to. So here's how I do it. There's several ways you can do this. You don't have to put nuts on this part right here, and feel free to experiment too and see what you like. I've tried some different methods. I've tried methods without springs, with springs. I've tried this with just 1 bolt and 1 nut on each point, and you know, I actually think that my favorite method is probably just not to use the springs, but the consensus, I believe, in the community is to use springs. So I'm going to show you how to use springs. And these springs are pretty much the same thing that you would get out of a big pen. They're pretty small. They're not really strong. So these could actually, let's see, we'll check to see if the bed fits okay on here. Okay, it does fit. Okay, so go ahead and tighten up the nuts. I use a 5.5 inch or 5.5mm open box end to tighten these up. I'll just move it around. So they're all kind of moving around. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I made a mistake. Okay, you might have to loosen these up. Get them to a point to where all 4 corners fit nicely of the bed on here. Okay, that's good now. Now you can go ahead and tighten them up. Now, the reason why I have the bed on at this point is because I'm making sure that the space between all of the bolts are correct on here. I'll take it off and put on the springs here in just a minute. Okay, that's pretty good. Then we can go ahead and remove the bed. Now, if you didn't want to use springs at this point, you'd put a nut on each bolt. And then perhaps a washer. And then you put the bed on. And then another washer. And then another nut. So that's how this would work if you weren't going to use springs. And you do that to all four corners, and then you would adjust the height by repositioning the nuts until you got it all level. But if you're using springs, it's a little bit different. Put the springs on. And the board. And a nut. I'm going to do this back corner first here. Just going to put the nut on just a little bit to hold it there in place. Here, fix this spring. Okay, the other corners look good. Once you get one on, just go ahead and put the nut on a little bit. So as you can see, this is actually kind of springing, which is kind of nice. The benefit to this is that, if you're printing something and the nozzle goes over like a blob of plastic that wasn't supposed to be there, normally it would cause like the y-axis to stop moving. But because it's springy, it might actually pop over that lump of plastic and continue printing. So it kind of does help a little bit to have that springiness. Now this is really high up off the bottom here though, so I'm actually going to go ahead and run the nut down a little ways. And I suppose you could also cut the springs in half if you wanted to shorten them, to bring this down lower. But this is a pretty good height right here. And now what I like to do is I like to put on one more nut on the top, and this will create a breaking point so that it doesn't try to readjust itself later. And those will need to be tightened down. Oh, also later after we get the RepRap up and running, we'll actually calibrate this to make sure that it's the same distance in all four corners between the bed or the heat bed and the nozzle, and I'll show you how to do that much later on. So I'm just going to hold on to the bottom nut and then tighten the top one so that I don't lose these. I'm not going to tighten these too tight, just tight enough so that they don't fall off for now, because I'll need to loosen them back up when we calibrate this later. Okay. That's looking pretty good. So I got a little bit of springiness. This one looks like it could come up a little bit more, but we'll measure that out later and make sure it's a good height. So that's looking really good there. And we'll connect this to the electronics later. I'll show you how to do all that. Okay, and this is the tempered glass bed that will go on here. So obviously these components are in the way, so it can only go so far back, but that should be adequate right there. So the glass bed will actually just clip on with these paper clips. And I think normally there's 4 of these, but I seem to be missing some. Okay, there we go. That's it. That's what it's going to look like. And this will get mounted to the electronics over here later, and it'll be able to move back and forth without any trouble. And we'll get the thermistor connected later too. Go ahead and run the wires through the holes we made earlier. Now, the reason why we're doing this is so that, you know, when it tugs on it, it's not tugging on the solder points. It's just tugging on the wire. So that's what it would be like. Okay. That takes care of the bed. Thanks for watching.